In mathematics, there is an agreed upon way to operate so that we can look at the same expression and get the same answer. To remember this order that we operate, we use the acronym PEMDAS, which stands for Please Excuse My Dear Aunt Sally. This acronym helps us remember the order that we should operate. P is for parentheses. So whenever we see parentheses, we do what's inside the parentheses first. Now these parentheses can look like this, they can be brackets, or they can be braces. If we see those parentheses, we do what's inside those first. E is for exponents. So something like some number squared or some number cubed. We would do exponents next. M and D go together because we multiply and divide from left to right. We don't multiply before we divide. We don't divide before we multiply. We multiply and divide from left to right. Finally, then A and S, we add and subtract, also from left to right. So 3 examples. Number 1, we have 2 plus 7 minus 5 plus 6. So first thing I'm looking for, are there parentheses? No. Are there exponents? Nope. Is there any multiplication or division? No. So I'm left with addition and subtraction. So I'm going to add and subtract from left to right. So let's start on the left side. The first thing that I see is 2 plus 7. So I want you to put a bracket underneath 2 plus 7. We're going to do that first. Well, 2 plus 7 is 9. Okay, everything else I'm going to copy. So I'm left with minus 5 plus 6. Minus 5 plus 6. Okay, so again, I have subtraction and addition. I'm going to add and subtract from left to right. So the next thing that I see on the far left is 9 minus 5. 9 minus 5 is 4. Bring everything else down, which is just plus 6. I'm left with 4 plus 6, which is 10. And I circle my final answer. Example number 2, I have 4 times 6 divided by 2 times 3. So I'm looking for parentheses. I don't see any. I see no exponents. I do have multiplication and division. So I'm going to multiply and divide from left to right. So start on the far left. You have 4 times 6. I know 4 times 6 is 24. Copy everything else down to the next line. So divided by 2 times 3. This is my new expression. Again, I'm going to move from left to right. So start on the far left. The first thing that I see is 24 divided by 2, which is 12. Copy everything else, which is just times 3. Bring that down to the next line. Finally, 12 times 3 is 36. That's my final answer. Last example, number 3. Here I have in parentheses 3 squared minus 1 times 5 divided by 2 minus 5 times 2. So I'm looking for parentheses. I do see parentheses, so I'm going to do what's inside of the parentheses first. Inside the parentheses, I have an exponent and I have subtraction. According to the order of operations, I should do exponents before I subtract. So I first must figure out what 3 squared is. This means 3 is a factor twice. So this is 3 times 3, which is 9. And so I'm going to keep the parentheses, and then everything else I'm going to copy. So inside the parentheses, I have 9 minus 1. I still have times 5 divided by 2 minus 5 times 2. I just bring everything else down to the next line. I still have parentheses in this expression, so I must do what's inside the parentheses. 9 minus 1, I'm going to put a little bracket to show that I'm focused on this. That's what I'm doing. 9 minus 1 is 8. Everything else gets brought down. Times 5 divided by 2 minus 5 times 2. Okay, so now I'm looking at this expression. I see no parentheses, so I'm going to move on to exponents. I have no exponents. So now I move on to multiplication and division. Remember, I multiply and divide from left to right. So on the left side, I start on the left with 8 times 5. I put a bracket underneath that. I am focused only on this. 8 times 5 is 40. All of this I bring down to the next line. Divided by 2 minus 5 times 2. Again, I have multiplication and division. I multiply and divide from left to right. Okay, so 40 divided by 2 is my focus. 40 divided by 2 is 20. I bring this down to the next line. Minus 5 times 2. So now I'm left with subtraction and multiplication. Which should I do first? Well, I should multiply before I subtract. So I'm focused on this now. 5 times 2. I know that 5 times 2 is 10. I'm going to bring 20 minus this down. So 20 minus 5 times 2, I said, is 10. This is what I'm left with. 20 minus 10 is 10. I circle my final answer.